Folks, thanks a lot for the 80,000 subscribers. You guys are awesome. But we're not stopping here. Let's push it, folks, to 100,000 subscribers. So give that support to the channel and subscribe and hit that like button down below to reach our goal of 153 likes. And now let's go for it. The story begins with a severely wounded commoner opening his eyes, delivered into the hands of his enemies who laugh around him with disdain for his humiliation. The foe in front, before ending the man's life, grants him the opportunity to cast one last spell. The injured man struggles to seize the chance, but all he manages is to invoke a weak magic that dissipates before reaching the target. Faced with this, the enemy recites a phrase from the father of magic, William Bordeaux. The most important thing for a mage is their lineage, talent, and effort. Then he adds that a commoner like him could never become a mage through effort alone, as he lacks talent and lineage, and finally casts a fire spell that sets the commoner ablaze. However, instead of screaming in despair, the commoner is enchanted by the fantastic magic that talented noble just cast, and even though the flames are painful, he sees beauty in it and would love to learn to do the same. Thus, while he admires the spell around him, the fire turns his body into ashes and takes his life away. Next, a baby awakens before several servants, with the consciousness of the commoner who had just died. Not knowing where he is or who those people are, he thinks to defend himself with a fireball, believing them to be giants. Then, moving his tiny hands, he invokes a magic that explodes inside the tower where he is. In the surroundings of the castle, the population celebrates the birth of the 7th prince of the Saloum Kingdom, named Lloyd, who on his first day of life already leaves the servants in awe with his strange talent. Several years later, the kingdom of Saloum seems at peace and anticipating the growth of the new leader of the nation, while inside the castle, the servants search for the young prince among the enormous corridors. However, the boy manages to evade the servants and tries to run away, until he encounters 2 men on the way and asks them not to tell the maids where he is. The men accept the request and invite young Lloyd to go hunting, since that is a worthy pastime for royalty, but the child only wants to play hide and seek. One of the men questions whether it's worth focusing so much on a boy who's out of the fight for the throne, but the more experienced man reminds that Lloyd started speaking within a few days of birth, has always been reading magic books instead of coloring books, refused breast milk as a form of chivalry, and furthermore, the man believes Lloyd to be the reincarnation of William Bordeaux, the father of magic. Meanwhile, Lloyd himself agrees that he reincarnated, but points out that in his past life, he was just an ordinary guy from the city of Salome. He has no idea why he still has his old memories or why he was reborn as a noble of the royal family, since he never cared about titles and glories. Since his past life, his true obsession was to explore and study magic. And at least this giant palace can provide all the knowledge he ever wanted and more, unlike the old Saloum Magic Academy. However, as he was about to resume his beloved studies, a servant named Silpha pulled the boy into his combat training. Once in action, Lloyd demonstrates great talent with a wooden sword, but doesn't understand why the 7th prince, with no chance of ascending the throne, really needs this training. Silpha reminds him that succession isn't everything, and that a member of royalty must know how to handle a weapon. Since she was entrusted with the boy's education 3 years ago, Silpha does what she can to develop the prince in the best way possible, so she takes her work very seriously. With that said, Lloyd realizes that slacking off will only make the lesson last longer, so he returns to the duel with a cheat to end the fight quickly and go back to reading. This cheat is a control magic to mimic all of the teacher's movements, making it seem like she's fighting against a mirror. However, as the woman is taller and stronger, copying the movements from a disadvantaged position is of no use, so Lloyd goes further in his cheat and casts a biological growth along with a physical enhancement, as well as levitation that puts him on equal footing with a rival. With this, Lloyd covers the differences he had and believes that this way he can win the fight, so he uses a trick up his sleeve to finally hit Silpha. Considering that he has been acting like a mirror for a long time, the girl is sure that all the opponent's movements will be imitations, so Lloyd improvises a different counterattack to surprise her. Then he advances swiftly behind the girl and strikes, but besides defending the attack, Silpha denounces that the boy is cheating and hits him with the sword hilt on the ear. Soon, she explains that the boy made the sword grow to gain more reach and levitated during the duel to match the height. However, instead of scolding Lloyd or giving him a punishment, she praises him for managing to cast 2 spells at the same time, something even the court wizards have difficulty doing. Spinning him in the air like a stuffed animal, she asks the young man not to rush too much to evolve, while Lloyd reflects that he was actually using 4 spells at the same time, but prefers to keep quiet about it. In addition to keeping silent about his real power, Lloyd sneaks through the palace at night to check if a rumor he had always heard about a forbidden library in the basement is true. Using an invisibility spell, he approaches a guard who confirms the existence of this library while warning his companion not to let his guard down, as in this forbidden place there is a magic that could shake the kingdom, as well as a dangerous demon that was sealed inside. Excited with the information, Lloyd descends the stairs while a guard assures that no bandit is capable of breaking their security, and even if they do, 10 mages use their strongest magic to seal the entrance, creating an unbreakable barrier. With that said, Lloyd destroys the seal as if it were nothing, and is amazed to have lived 10 years in that place without knowing that there was such an incredible hidden section. Without a second thought, he explores the library like a child in an amusement park, planning to reconstruct the entrance seal when he leaves until a strange creature emerges from within a book and is impressed by a kid finally breaking through the magical barrier. The monster introduces himself as Grimoire, the demon of the forbidden book, while Lloyd responds with his name as well. The demon wishes for the boy to break his seal, but Lloyd ponders if that's the right thing to do. Grimoire points out that his seal is bound to break any moment now due to its age, and furthermore, he can reward the child with however much gold he desires. However, Lloyd approaches one of those supposed gold coins and discovers it's a low-level creation magic, leaving the demon incredulous that he's been unmasked by a child. Moreover, Lloyd corners the creature and asserts that he will actually put its seal back, as his study of magic is based on the libraries of this realm, and letting a demon loose could jeopardize everything. Grimoire argues that the guys who sealed him were from centuries past, and therefore he harbors no grudge against anyone in the present, but the kid isn't buying it. So Grimoire promises to teach him about ancient magics from hundreds of years ago, and thus he captures the young one's attention. With that, Grimoire assumes a more innocent form and praises the child, stating he has great talent for magic, though this triggers Lloyd's past life memory, where the mysterious mage claimed he had no talent or lineage. Still, Lloyd agrees with Grimoire and even adds that he has a much more privileged background than commoners, making the demon pretend to agree while internally wanting to bury his face in the ground. Soon the seventh prince breaks the seal of the demon from the forbidden book, who can't believe the kid fell for such a silly trick. Then Lloyd asks when they will start the lessons on ancient magic, and Grimoire casts the dark shot spell on him, asking if he had time to learn. Convinced the kid had met his end, Grimoire wonders what to do next. However, Lloyd emerges unscathed with a magical shield around him, impressed by the exotic design of the spell cast. Innocently, he asks if the demon could teach another power besides that, but Grimoire is inclined to end the game, so he casts several dark shots at the magical shield, yet none of them damage the barrier. Seeing the spells exploding on the barrier, Lloyd can't contain his curiosity and brings a piece inside to observe and try to learn how it works. The boy's finger turns raw with mana density, but he licks the scraped finger as if it were cotton candy and asks the demon to send the next lesson. Grimoire goes wild and assumes a transformation that allows him to conjure the spiral dark shot. When the magic hits the barrier, Lloyd takes the opportunity to analyze that the fusion of two enchantments is a special type of magic that only two-mouthed demons can cast, as if it were a more advanced stage of the normal dark shot. Despite admiring the spell, he wasn't even able to scratch Lloyd's magical shield, and with that, Grimoire simply can't believe his most powerful magic is useless against this barrier. Lloyd ignores the demon's frustration and comments that he must have been very excited to learn that spell, memorizing the formula and controlling the mana flow as if it were the most fun thing in the world. At this point, Grimoire doesn't even know how to react to this crazy kid anymore, so he tries to flee out of fear of the worst happening. However, Lloyd had extended his barrier to the limits of the library to protect the entrance to the castle, so the demon loses his last card and at least tries to convince the child he wasn't trying to escape. Lloyd believes the demon's word and explains that actually he did something so dangerous in the past that since then, he decided to take precautions and isolate the environments where things could get heated. Grimoire loses patience again with this story and threatens the prince again, but Lloyd isn't up for defending against another dark shot. This time he wants to see an ancient defensive magic, and so he summons the impetuous fireball for the demon to defend against. Despite the boy's good intention, Grimoire almost turns into roasted goat in the entirely devastated library, and Lloyd asks why he didn't defend himself. Next, the prince uses his magic to restore the entire place from the total ruin his fireball caused, and all Grimoire wants to know is who this snotty kid really is. The demon sucks up to the child to clean his slate, and Lloyd returns the compliments innocently. Then Lloyd points out that demons cannot die through magic, but he would love to test how far one of them can endure. With that, Grimoire backs off for good and swears loyalty to the kid, offering himself as a familiar. Lloyd accepts the proposal, but as the demon attracts too much attention with his demon dog carcass, he transforms into a mini demon to win Lloyd over with cuteness, since he couldn't in the exchange. The boy asks the demon to get inside his clothes, and Grimoire sees this as a chance to cling to his body and control his mind, but the boy's mana was so insane that the demon knew touching a finger to that grotesque mass was signing his own death warrant, so he backs off and decides to be nice for now, asking Lloyd to call him Grim. With everything settled, the seventh prince can finally return to reading his books in peace. Sometime later, inside the castle, the Saloon Kingdom, a member of the royal family is carefully groomed by his servants, and clad in his royal attire, he strides through one of the mansion's halls past his bowing attendants until he enters the library, where Lloyd was engrossed in his numerous books on magic. Grim asks what to do in the presence of such a stranger, so the little boy asks him to hide. Soon, upon seeing who it was, Lloyd becomes excited at Albert's arrival. Together, they head down to the training field, and Albert showcases his new magic skills, hitting a target dead-on with his fire spell, leaving everyone around impressed with the lad's accuracy. While Lloyd applauds the performance, Grim asks if this is indeed the second prince, and Lloyd confirms it, adding that he has a great physique and is very intelligent to the point where they say he'll be the next king of Salem. Albert has authority to access all the castle's facilities, and sometimes invites Lloyd to explore the surroundings with him. As it's one of the rare opportunities to do magic in the castle, the boy is grateful for the invitations, like this one, for example. Soon it's Lloyd's turn to showcase his magic skills, but as he doesn't want to draw attention to the point of being dragged into the succession to the throne, he thinks about purposefully curving the fireball to just graze the target, making everyone think he lacks talent. Sure enough, the seventh prince casts a spell for each target, and in all of them, the result is the same, never hitting the targets head-on. In response, people applaud, but a nobleman scoffs at the fact that the child can only manage to graze them all, while Grim wonders if the man knows how difficult it is to do all that on purpose. Next, Lloyd decides to add rotation to the fireballs, saving mana and making the trajectory more stable. However, before the presentation, Albert bids farewell to his brother for a short break, but everyone present leaves with the second prince. Instead of being offended, Lloyd celebrates having the shooting gallery all to himself because he's eager to test his new powers, like the double enchantment trick he learned from the Grimoire. Grim warns that this technique is exclusive to demons because if a human messes with it, they might end up getting a second mouth for free. In this case, seemingly casually, Lloyd absorbs Grim into his body and manifests him in his own hand, leaving the demon outraged. Nevertheless, Lloyd asks him to cast the impetuous fireball, and the goat boasts since advanced magic is a piece of cake for him. However, a whirlwind of random spells mixes in the body shared by the two, and after a carnival of auditory and visual hallucinations, Grim seems to have returned from a trip. Reflecting on what happened, Lloyd remembers that they've just experienced a spell stack, which is a technique of mixing enchantments from various spells to reduce their activation time. Apparently, the boy was invoking 100 spells at the same time, and this caused a combustion. With this, Grim freaks out and comments that it's right to use 2 or 3 at most, but the child thinks that the invocation will still be too slow. To correct this problem, Lloyd borrows the demon's mouth to recite 2 advanced enchantments at once, controlling his speech. Then merging the impetuous fireball with the impetuous cascade ball, a surreal increase in mana envelops Lloyd, and Grim can't believe that the young man is capable of combining 2 such different spells. With the double enchantment prepared, Lloyd knows he can't release his spell of this level on the surface, so he points the energy buildup upward, displaying a magical wave so vast and powerful that it could be seen from every corner of the kingdom. Meanwhile, inside the palace, a nobleman asks why Albert pays so much attention to Lloyd, since he's just a child with little talent for magic and nothing more. In response, Albert asserts that the man has no clue about talent thinking like that. After all, Lloyd hit all the targets in the same way, and it's quite possible that he did it on purpose. In Albert's opinion, the seventh prince is a prodigy, possibly even becoming a great sage one day, and at the same time an important asset for Albert. The nobleman remarks that the future king can and should make use of the services of the great sage, but Albert laughs and replies that his only intention is to get along with his little brother. At that moment, the man observes through the window the darkened sky and wonders if the sun has already set. But according to the astonished Grim, his master opened a hole in the sky that crossed the morning and exposed the bright night underneath the covers. But soon the boy backs off with this insane magic and interrupts the phenomenon, while Grim wonders who the heck this child is after all. In the next scene, we are treated to a bonus anime animation showing a battered Lloyd being tended to by Grim, who has no idea why he's acting like this brat's nanny. On the other hand, the healthier Grim can keep the child, the healthier the body he will possess once he gets the chance. Keeping this in mind, the demon wipes the snot from the runny-nosed boy as he awaits the future where he will be free again. With the end of the bonus scene, the little flying goat finds an article in a newspaper talking about a mysterious hole in the sky, but when he shows it to Lloyd that his spell became famous, The young human seems more interested in the back of the newspaper, where another article announced a group of rank adventurers who cleared a powerful dungeon and collected all the precious treasures. This article gives the boy the idea to explore dungeons himself, hoping to get a bunch of items with magical powers. Grimm argues that the royal family will freak out when they can't find the seventh prince within the kingdom's domains, so Lloyd solves the problem by creating a wooden replica of himself, perfectly identical both in appearance and in the resin that imitates bones and skin, with the roots functioning as the circulatory system. The copy is so good that Grimm claims Lloyd will be able to leave very calmly, but the boy responds that if it were that easy, he would have done it before. According to him, the real problem is Sylph, who, on another day, for example, entered Lloyd's room and commented that he had grown 0.07 millimeters in the last few days. For this reason, the boy doubts that he would fool that woman with a doll that only knows how to dance like a fool, but fortunately, he has another card up his sleeve. Soon, he was already flying over the skies of Salem towards his adventure, while communicating with his replica through Grimm, who possessed Lloyd's copy while talking to him through the boy's hand. The maids around observe the wooden doll and comment that the prince is very vain, and that is the cutest thing in the world for them. Meanwhile, Grimm is trying to maintain posture after having put his mind in the replica and the body in Lloyd's hand. Then the master asks the servant to be alert with Sylph and sets off on the journey while Grimm takes advantage of the master's absence in his fake body with mana to bring discord to humanity. However, at this moment, Lloyd says he is very happy to have Grimm as a familiar and affirms that he relies on him for everything. Faced with this, the demon sheds some tears, but soon pretends to be brave again so as not to convey an image he doesn't want. Meanwhile, Lloyd has no idea where to find a dungeon, so he stops to think for a moment, until a girl appears in the forest fleeing from several orcs. After running from them for a while, she turns against them and strikes each one with such force that the creature's eyes pop out. Finally, the woman invokes a magic that destroys the monsters into pieces, while her cape appears with the word warrior. Grimm thinks she's one of those martial artists, and Lloyd loved the way she breathes because she channels an energy called Kai through their bodies by breathing, which allows the use of incredible techniques. At this point, the warrior tells the hidden boy to show his face, and Lloyd sees this as an opportunity to learn more about this breathing. But Grimm fears she will find out that the boy is a prince of Salem. Lloyd agrees and remains hidden, so the girl identifies him as an enemy and prepares to face him. However, the wizard had disguised himself as a novice adventurer named Robert, and since this transformation spell could only make him become who he already knows, Lloyd used the double enchantment and mixed his appearance with that of his brother Albert, and by combining the two, the boy created an original form. Feeling unthreatened, the girl introduces herself as Tao, a rank B adventurer as well as a martial artist. Lloyd is worried that she might suspect something, but instead, she is simply in love with this new appearance of Lloyd Saloon. After 18 years dedicated to training, Tao even met some boys along the way, but they only had eyes for delicate and finicky priestesses, so she promises to make Robert her boyfriend whatever it takes. Lloyd is confused by the girl's behavior and says goodbye, but Tao asks to join the young man, so they go to the entrance of a dungeon in the forest. Beating everyone up, Tao asks if Robert fell in love with her strength, but the guy only has eyes for the shiny stones in the cave. A little further ahead, Lloyd asks if Tao ventures alone, and the girl replies yes, since she never found any decent men, or rather, adventure companions to share the journey. Sometime later during a meal, Lloyd wants to know about this Kai that the girl used to make those attacks, and Tao is impressed that someone from this continent knows this rare technique. Lloyd explains that Kai is somewhat like how mana works in magic, because the way you breathe is also important for the traditional technique. Then she teaches that Ki begins and ends with breathing, which you use to control Ki, allowing you to gain explosive power beyond normal capacity. Even to feel the Ki, it is necessary to practice breathing a lot. But speaking of Ki, Tao flirts that it's much easier to feel what she wants with Robert, but at this point the boy was trying to imitate the breath to feel this manifestation in him. After failing, Tao scolds the boy because he risked burning his lungs since he is not accustomed to this technique. Despite everything, Lloyd managed to feel this vibration inside him, a separate energy from mana within his body, and is moved to have experienced such a beautiful moment of magic. Seeing the boy's dedication to this goal, Tao promises to teach him more about this technique, so she asks him to practice maintaining that breath until they leave the dungeon. Meanwhile, Grimm is enjoying his day as the boss, not understanding how that brat doesn't care about all this comfort and only keeps his face buried in magic books all day. At this moment, Sylph approaches and Grimm already knows this is going to be trouble. Meanwhile, Tao showed the real prince the power of the Kai burst she used to defeat the boss of this dungeon, the Grey Wolf, on the first try. With that, they can now open the treasure chest. But the girl warns that such a weak dungeon shouldn't give any decent items. Seeing his companion fascinated by the mechanics of the chest, Tao comments that he seems more interested in the chest itself than in what's inside it, and shortly after notices that he has maintained the key breath until now, and therefore begins to consider that indeed this man might be a catch, and who knows, even her annoying grandfather might approve of this engagement. However, her beloved Robert only has eyes for the treasure chest, but when he opens it, a trap is activated and almost cuts the adventurers in half. After that, a lich emerges from under the chest and floats in front of the two. Despite the scary appearance, Lloyd seems innocently interested in the monster, wanting to know if it's another boss of this dungeon. Lloyd asks what kind of creature that is, but Tao brushes it off and asks the boy to wait outside. Faced with his reluctance to leave, she forces him through a technique to be alone in the battle against this powerful enemy. At that moment, Tao is attacked by the lich, and even though she regrets treating Robert that way, the enemy's blows show it's better than the boy dying there. Tao even breaks the lich's magic, but she has no idea why such a strong monster is in such a low-level dungeon, where even A-rank adventurers have difficulty with it. Meanwhile, Lloyd stands with his arms crossed, frustrated for not learning more about Kai. So he summons a shield that plows through the monsters in front until he manages to break free from Tao's technique. Still, he's unsure whether to return or not, so he asks Grimm's opinion. However, the demon is seriously weakened and can only ask the master to return. In the meantime, Tao continues to stand against the enemy, but she knows she can't win this fight, and this is her end. But since she sent her dear Robert out there, maybe she can slip away from that place. However, the lich comments on the human's chi techniques, saying he's eaten someone who mastered that art, which is nothing more than an inferior form of magic. Now it's Tao's turn to be devoured by the monster and have her abilities stolen, but according to him, it would only be worth eating that boy who reacted to his initial attack. In response, Tao comments that Robert and the lich are alike in always seeking knowledge, but unlike the monster, the boy is capable of finding what he's looking for even under a rock, not inside a person's stomach. She knows that the people of the continent treat Ki as an outdated technique from the countryside, but Robert said he found it amazing. Then the lich asks what that has to do with anything, until Tao uses her breath to strike the enemy, but he protects himself with a magical shield. Still, the girl has been training since she was 5 years old to strike with force, even depriving her of doing normal things like getting a boyfriend, so at least she has to use all that sacrifice to cause damage in a fight like this. True to her word, she shatters the shield with a punch, then applies a technique that penetrates the barrier as if it were an eggshell. However, this power has consumed almost all of the fighter's energy, and now she can barely move. Without having suffered a scratch, the lich reappears and says that even the girl's most powerful K technique is weaker than a simple magic he can do with just one finger. Finally, he declares that the young woman wasted her life in vain, then applies the Morisishra ability on Tao to end the fight. Despite this, Lloyd was there with his magical shield to prevent his friend from dying. Serene, as always, the kid says he'll have to be quick because he's in a hurry, then challenges the lich to play. Tao looks scared at that boy she thought was so different, while the lich finds amusement in that arrogance and prepares a spell to confirm his superiority, but Lloyd is extremely fast and reaches the enemy's back, invoking with his lungs the disbearer magic of the air type even without enchantment. The lich attacks again, but Lloyd is comfortable inside his shield, reflecting on the combination of ki and mana. Soon, thinking about Tao's teachings, he focuses his breath to bring more air to his lungs and accelerate the magic. With this, the shield becomes unstable and travels through the cave, making the monster think the human wants to escape, but the boy is struggling to gather more and more air. The barrier continued to withstand the creature's continuous attacks, but Lloyd ends up having to dispel it to use the external air. Seeing the exposed target, the lich sings victory and unleashes the ultimate spell, but the human begins to dodge the onslaughts to breathe in more oxygen and channel as much ki as possible. Thus, he shapes his mana along with the ki, and begins to form a magic that becomes a disc in his hand. This disc circulates around his body to protect the user from magical threats, but according to Lloyd, the spell didn't take the form he wanted. So this time he produces 2 thinner discs for them to reach the lich, who uses Morisishra to protect himself. The monster's defense manages to block some discs, but Lloyd throws new spells so fast that the enemy doesn't have time to react. Faced with this situation, the lich swallows his own arrogance at seeing a Kai technique defeating his spells until Lloyd prepares his thinnest and sharpest energy disc so far. The lich protects himself once again with his magical shield, but the disc cuts through the barrier along with its summoner in a perfect strike, finally throwing the lich back into the depths of darkness. Tao can't believe what she's seeing, while the boy seems to have enjoyed this training. Afterward, they finally go after the well-deserved loot, but they see it was a waste of time because there was only an old rusty knife inside the chest. However, Lloyd notices that it's imbued with magic and asks to keep the weapon, until the chest is pulled down into the earth, causing the cave to start collapsing. Thus, Lloyd realizes that the treasure is the core that sustains each dungeon, and evaluating the mechanism that feeds all these dungeons, the kid gets excited as the cave is coming down, which makes Tao more and more desperate. Finally, he grabs the chest he wanted so much, and they both get out of there. Upon leaving, Lloyd analyzes that the chest would be responsible for gathering forces underground to give life to the dungeon once again. Intrigued, Tao asks if the boy used Kai instead of magic just because the Lich disdained the technique, but in fact the boy just thought it would be more fun. At that moment, he remembers something and flies quickly upwards, but before he goes, Tao promises that she'll strive until she can use the final technique that the boy used, the Key Blade. Finally, Lloyd replies that whether it's magic or Kai, the important thing is always to be progressing before departing. As for Tao, she really intends to progress, especially to become attractive to Robert, and that's why she freaks out when she remembers she didn't get his contact. At the end of the return trip, Lloyd arrives desperate behind Grim, and the demon had 4 roosters on his head given by Silpha during daily training. On that occasion, the kid was shaking a lot, leaving the teacher puzzled by this strange behavior, so she decides to be tougher with the student because he suddenly became weak. After that, Grim just cried like a child while waiting for his master's return. After that, in the extra animation of the episode, Lloyd stuffed everything he could and then summoned to his magic bag, and Tao wondered what kind of black hole was inside there, but Lloyd teaches that he uses the field expansion magic to freely increase the space of any bag or sack. Arriving home, the boy empties the bag full of rubble and garbage because the dungeon collapsed and destroyed most of the items. With the remaining item in hand, Grim questions if Lloyd spent all this time to bring back an old knife, but the boy asks his friend not to get rid of the item because an old knife is what makes good magic. Right after putting the weapon in hot water and scraping the surface, the mana essence was coming out cracking, a catalyst that elevates imbued magical formulas to incredible levels. In the case of this knife, it seems to have been enchanted with strengthening power. Then he shakes all the essence into a container to break the formula, but he is careful not to waste this material, as it's not something you find on every corner. Therefore, Lloyd analyzes the mana essence to be able to create more on his own and uses the water purification ability to filter impurities and separate the base elements, which are oil, silver, and hematite. Grim comments that hematite is made from monster core powder, but Lloyd thinks he can make a workaround with the dungeon core. Now he's just missing oil, silver, and a bunch of weapons. So the playboy goes to his father and asks for that cool contribution. The old man asks if it wouldn't be better to give it in gold, but Lloyd really needs silver, and the king is delighted with his boy's humility. So with the material in hand, the human and the demon gather in a secluded and dark room to get down to business. The next day, things started to return to normal, and Silpha was recognizing her apprentice again in sword fighting. When using the sprint, Lloyd runs under the girl's skirt, but she's faster than that and dodges the attack. Then he summons a magic that impresses the tutor, but it only served as cover for Silpha to hide and end the fight with another victory on her account. After training, Lloyd doesn't think it's fair to win the oil, since the deal was to get the substance if he hit the teacher once, but just seeing that the boy is no longer yesterday's scaredy cat, Silpha is already satisfied with today's training. Watching from the sidelines, Grim is upset that he didn't beat the maid, while she reflects that Lloyd could be the leader of the knights when he grows up, since he's mastering both swordplay and magic. So the boy says goodbye and returns with the oil in hand. Now only the weapons were missing to complete the formula, so Lloyd goes to his brother Albert to sort this out. Albert thought the youngest would ask for candy or a Hot Wheels track, but is happy to see the child's love for magic. So he asks his guards who wants to have their weapons strengthened by his little brother. Everyone hands over the equipment to demonstrate loyalty, but the soldiers are crying for fear of losing their sword to a 10-year-old playing enchantment. In the meantime, once again, Grim keeps an eye behind the scenes. With everything in hand, Lloyd activates the automatic assistant on his clone, while the demon motivates the group to create the strongest weapons in the kingdom. Therefore, Lloyd appeals by drawing 3 layers of enchantment on a single sword, in addition to applying elasticity enhancement and several other formulas wherever there's a little space left. However, the seal can't handle so much magic and ends up bursting the sword, so the young mage tries to go easier to not throw the whole formula in the trash. In this back and forth of swords, Lloyd was spending one after another until he managed to enhance 50 out of 120. Upon returning to Albert, he regrets breaking 70, but in fact he had managed 80, only he broke 10 more trying to cram a lot of magic into them. Analyzing the armaments, Albert recalls that the success rate of a first-rate enchanter is only 10%, so his brother did an unbelievable job. Suddenly, he notices one particular sword among the others, while his soldiers plan to pretend that their swords got better by not believing that the enchantment worked, until one of their swords cut the scabbard in half when sheathed. At that moment, Albert draws his treasure and Lloyd is eager to see his creations in action, so the second prince calls the youngest to hunt a monster. So early the next morning, the nobles traverse through the city of Saloum, while the newsboy, accompanied by man's best friend, organizes the shelves of his newspaper stand to start another day of service. As they cross the gates, servants work in the vast wheat fields surrounding the kingdom until Lloyd wakes from his slumber and is alerted by his brother that their destination is near. Guiding the carriage, Silpha explains to the young prince that there are probably no monsters in the middle of this forest, but rather in the lake ahead, where they are headed. Lloyd is excited about this modest adventure, considering he rarely has permission to leave the castle, and it's also an opportunity to test the weapons he himself created. Inside, Albert comments that Silpha never takes her eyes off the little prince, and she responds that she feels grateful to personally accompany her student and master. However, Albert questions if there is a feeling beyond just protection, and the girl responds this time by showing the blade of her sword instead of sweet words. At that moment, she notices the presence of an ambush of kobolds that soon attacks the carriage, so the soldiers hurry to protect the nobles. Inside Lloyd's cloak, Grimm comments that the boy surely already knew about it, and indeed he had used his presence detection that Tao taught him with the key technique, an ability that allows him to sense everything around him all the time. In the midst of battle, the soldiers of Saloum tear the kobolds apart as if they were made of paper, which fills the young hare with pride in his works of art. The blades were so sharp that the wielders themselves were afraid of injuring themselves with them, and Albert boosts the morale of the youngest by showcasing the boy's talent with enchantment to the troops. Silpha also recognizes the boy's gift amidst her pile of monsters, even though she didn't receive any bonuses on her equipment. Suddenly, a kobold attacks the child by surprise, but Tao appears again to end the threat with a punch. Sensing the presence of a hunk, or rather, monsters, she came running to save the day. Lloyd almost talks to her as if she were still Robert, but manages to hold back, so Tao approaches curious about the fact that the kid uses key breathing. Looking at the boy's face, she was sure it was Robert himself in front of her, until Silpha interrupts the intimate way the girl is treating the seventh prince of Saloum. Tao warns that her key technique cannot be underestimated, so the two create friction right there until Albert minimizes the situation by calling the fighter to accompany the carriage to the shores of the lake ahead. As night falls, the expedition unit sets up a camp for the troops, and soon Albert introduces himself to Tao as the second prince of the kingdom of Saloum. Upon discovering that he is a noble, the girl apologizes for having acted that way earlier while secretly drooling over the young man. According to her, Albert even looks like Robert, but surely he's not the hunk she felt the presence of. Meanwhile, Lloyd tries to stay hidden, and Grimm advises him not to stop his key breathing to avoid arousing more suspicions, so he decides to wait in his tent until the monster appears. Inside, Silpha shares the lodging with the prince to keep him protected, but the kid thinks he can handle himself alone. Faced with the bad response, Silpha shows with a leg lock who's in charge there, until Tao enters the tent out of nowhere and protests upon seeing the servants subduing the poor child. Then, Silpha tries to hit the intruder with a knife, claiming to have sensed the presence of an idiot, and she immediately tells Tao to stop with that inappropriate look at Prince Lloyd as the fighter denies the accusation loudly. As for the boy himself, he moves away from the confusion and feels that this way he will be more trapped than inside the castle. A little further ahead, Albert enjoys a coffee in the night breeze and comments that his little brother is breaking hearts. After all, Silpha has changed a lot since she started taking care of the youngest, and she looks at him as if the boy were already a grown man. However, Albert advises the kid to be careful with the relationships that may come ahead, because those two there seem a bit out of the ordinary, for example. Speaking of which, noticing a bunch of guys around rooting for the fight, the girls shake up the soldiers, making Lloyd agree with his brother's observation about the sanity of the duo. Then, Tao mentions that she was hired to repair an ancient temple that can be seen on top of a nearby hill, making Silpha ask why she doesn't go do her job right away. But before the discussion resumes, Albert comments that it's dangerous to go up there without help, so he invites Tao to spend the night there and continue the journey the next day. However, a huge creature disrupts the plans of the second prince by appearing in the camp, leaving everyone on alert except Lloyd, who is happy to have finally found a decent monster. In the bonus animation of this episode, Lloyd enchants the kingdom's swords along with Grimm in his wooden copy. Drawing the symbols on the weapon, he breaks one blade after another until the clone finds Albert's sword and Grimm wants to leave it aside to avoid trouble. But Lloyd is sure that his brother left his sword there as a bonus. So he scribbles drawing after drawing, causing smoke on the weapon that reaches the point of exploding, but surprisingly it works out in the end. Soon everyone is positioned in front of the powerful wolf bear that terrorizes the camp, and Silpha tells the young prince to stay behind her. The boy is impressed by the speed of the beast, considering its absurd size, while Grim only has eyes for the mysterious temple Tao mentioned. Speaking of her, the fighter saves a soldier on the brink of death, and when the wolf was about to retaliate, the girl dodged in time. At that moment, Albert takes the lead, and with his magic sword, he promises to defeat the wolf bear that torments the local people so much. Soon he unleashes the impetuous fireball, which engulfs the creature in flames until it is completely carbonized. Behind him, his soldiers praise the power of the second prince, who credits Loy for enchanting his magic sword to the point of making it so powerful. Apart from the celebration, Grim suddenly remembers that the place atop the hill is a temple that seals a demon. With that said, the charred wolf bear rises again like an undead, accompanied by ghostly creatures around it. Within the giant animal, a voice mocks the human's attempt to harm its servants, and soon the demon Pazuzu appears from the wolf's mouth, swearing to make the humans pay the price of their insolence with their lives. Thus, the creatures advance against Saloon's forces, terrorizing the battlefield, and even though Albert hits the eye of one of them, the monster regenerates automatically. Tao arrives with a flying kick to prevent the prince from being attacked, and soon the boy looks around and realizes that these wolf bears are different from any he has seen before, with some even being hybrids, so he believes this is the work of that demon. Away from the fight, Lloyd asks Grim if he happens to know this other demon, and although he doesn't, Grim knows that he transmutes mana to control the monsters as if they were puppets, and that this power grants enough mana to the controlled monsters for them to regenerate from the attacks they receive. With that said, looking at his little monster with a pleading look, Lloyd asks him to teach him how to transmute mana right now. In the midst of the conflict, Silpha hopes Toe gets trampled by a giant beast, and Grim tries to convince the master that it's better to postpone the lesson for another day, but the boy isn't keen on waiting. Watching the war, Pazuzu admits that some humans there are even talented, but the rest are useless trash, like that kid and his nanny who are pretending to protect the brat out of fear. Upon hearing this, Silpha seems possessed by some deep feeling of hatred, and asking the prince for permission, she addresses Pazuzu, who continues to provoke her, saying that she would rather be his servant than the kid's. So Silpha questions if as his servant, she would be like that old bag where the demon is hidden, which only doesn't smell worse than the beast inside it. Finally, she announces that Pazuzu is polluting the Prince Lloyd's fresh air, and therefore he will have to die. At this, the demon laughs once more and reminds everyone that all wounded wolf bears heal instantly, so as long as his mana is channeled, his servants will be indestructible. And as for mana depletion, the humans shouldn't worry, because demons are practically a bunch of mana. At this moment, Silpha puts her hand on her face and Pazuzu comments that no one will save her now, so she responds that she's actually avoiding his foul breath. At that moment, the demon tries to grab the distracted Silpha and attacks, making Albert think it's the end for her, but she not only dodged, but also cut off each of the wolf's 4 legs. Pazuzu regenerates once again, but everyone notices that this regeneration has become slower for all wolf bears. Outside the Eye of the Storm, Grim teaches that transmuting mana is delicate work, because as Pazuzu did, mana was synchronized with the nature of the beasts, intensifying control over them. A good start for this is to put a color in your mana, then the shape and smell. Soon Lloyd had produced a pink flower with an incredible perfume, so he and Grim took a few seconds to savor the aroma of that work of art. Meanwhile, Silpha flays Pazuzu with her left arm on his back, and on top of that, she asked for one of the soldiers' enchanted swords to end the show. Pazuzu begins to realize that things are getting serious, and so far he hasn't found any opening in her defense, which now, to make matters worse, possesses a more powerful weapon. Faced with this, the demon confesses that he became interested in this kid that such a powerful nanny strives to protect, so he plans to cut him open to examine his body until he realizes that he was just a pile of flesh and that his effort was futile from the beginning. While making these threats, Pazuzu spun at an extraordinary speed around the woman until he found an opening to bite her. After the blow, Pazuzu boasts of having managed to provoke the enemy's inattention, but Silpha had only hitched a ride with the wolf to get to the demon's side. Soon Silpha had torn the beast from the inside out using her Langless clan technique, the Ascension of the 2 dragons, to then cut the animal with the Swallow Dive ability. Enraged, Pazuzu rants that the woman is just a mere servant, and she continues her attack by piercing the devil's face with her blades, followed by the Claws and Fangs ability, from the Twin Tiger technique. Having done that, Silpha exposes the rotten creature that lived inside the beast, leaving all present awestruck by such power, while Lloyd memorizes her movements. Thus, Silpha laughs at the fact that the demon thought he would touch her master, and shows that the only thing he'll get from the master is the chill of the blade enchanted by him. As Lloyd continues playing with his mana flower as if nothing was happening, Silpha demands that Pazuzu surrender, but he laughs in the woman's face as he exhales a mist that envelops the surroundings. Tao and Albert control the monsters, but the prince warns that as long as the demon is alive, his minions could return at any moment. Suddenly, the mist knocks down all the humans present, while Pazuzu reveals that just over a century ago he broke the sanctuary seal, so everyone will pay for what they did to his minions. In a burst of strength, the demon returns to the battle with fury and throws Silpha aside, while Albert lacks the strength to rise. Pazuzu reveals that this mist is the domination miasma, which makes all affected obey him, so Silpha comments that she now understands the stench. Pazuzu gets agitated once again at the offense and attacks Tao in retaliation, forcing the key specialist to defend herself with difficulty. Thrown close to Silpha, Tao asks if she's okay, but even though she says yes, poor thing is trembling with cold and spitting blood, so she falls again without strength. Pazuzu acknowledges that the warrior was fierce to continue resisting even while inhaling the miasma so closely, but regardless, he wants to know why Tao also didn't surrender to the evil mist. Tao tries to kick the demon, but she's so weak that she doesn't stand a chance. Subduing his victim, the entity analyzes that perhaps it's the strange breathing of the fighter that allows her to resist the miasma control, but as she's exhausted and upside down, Tao's key breath is becoming increasingly difficult to sustain. Pazuzu believes that the girl didn't run when she had the chance because she prefers to become his servant, so she rebels against the statement and corrects by saying that in fact, she would never betray a handsome guy in need, so she unleashes the Thunder Pulse on the enemy. The problem is that using such a powerful technique destabilizes the user's breath, and on top of that, one of Pazuzu's monsters regenerates and bites the human. The demon wants to know who this handsome guy the girl mentioned is because all he sees around is a bunch of ugly trash on the ground. On the other hand, he believes that true beauty is being able to regenerate his minions as many times as he wants, and with that said, he uses the maximum domination miasma to fully control the enemy. But even with the entity's vapor, Tao can still feel a presence that made her realize she was right all along, and the certainty gave her the courage to affirm that the hottest guy of all will kick this demon. The wolf bear devours the girl while Pazuzu spits on the ground and comments that in the end she was just a human like any other. But he can't say the same about Silpha, so the warrior emerges to become his most promising servant, while Lloyd plays Naruto by walking on the water just below. The little boy asks if it's this miasma that controls the wolves, and Pazuzu replies that he killed each one's parents and then used the vapor to occupy that paternal space in the minds of the beasts. So while the demon laughs at the memory, Lloyd comforts one of the beasts, and that's when Pazuzu realizes that the kid was walking inside the miasma without a problem, so he questions how that's possible. Lloyd answers that he has no idea. Furthermore, Pazuzu realizes that there was another demon in the area upon noticing the grimoire, so he despises the little one for being ashamed to the species by serving a mere human. In response, Grimm offers his silence because he had thought of giving some advice to his fellow demon, but now he just wants him to turn to ashes. On the other hand, Pazuzu intends to do the same with the traitor of his class, so he orders his minions to attack, finally giving Lloyd the opportunity to test his mana transmutation. With that done, Lloyd transmutes the wolf bears into adorable pets, like the ones we see in pet food commercials on TV, only dozens of times larger. Pazuzu looks wide-eyed at the scene in disbelief, while Lloyd recognizes the dog that swallowed Tao and asks him to spit her out and covers her with his poncho. The demon expels his miasma again to regain control of his servants, but Grimm observes that by now they had regained their pride and were fully aware that that malevolent entity was responsible for executing their parents. With that stuck in their throats, each beast tears pieces from Pazuzu's body, who releases Silpha in the act. As the girl falls into the water and sinks, Lloyd admires the scene of the pack of wolf bears hunting down the entity as a group. However, Pazuzu puts the animals back in their place by subjugating all of them and still belittles the deaths of their parents. After that, Pazuzu turns his attention to the little sorcerer, and he's sure that regardless of what the boy uses, nothing will be effective against a demon. Lloyd remembers that Grimm also thought the same thing, and indeed, it was something that had never happened before, because when Lloyd killed the field of flowers he had created, the demon reinforces the powerful vision that demons possess, but the sorcerer doesn't think they are invincible, maybe just knowing to kill. So Lloyd envelops himself in a surreal mana cloud, and Grimm makes Pazuzu understand the reason his miasma doesn't affect this kid, because on an ordinary day of study, he decided to hide his mana just to avoid attention. However, now that he's there facing this demon, Lloyd wants to take advantage and test his restriction magics, making the feared winged entity feel like a mosquito and a nightmare in the face of all that power. Firstly, the sorcerer tries to put the demon inside a magical barrier, but he escapes. When Lloyd starts the same incantation again, Pazuzu understands that the human doesn't want to fight, but rather to put him in a cage, so he flies at full speed to avoid being trapped in one of those magical barriers. As the target becomes exhausted from fleeing, Grim wonders how many spells Lloyd can cast at once, and he replies about 20 depending on which one, but with his friend's help, he can manage more. Having said that, Grim joins the Master in the conjuration, and together they summon so many shields that the demon is forced to go underwater to avoid being caught. Still, the conjurations didn't stop, and thus Pazuzu ends up becoming confident in his escape ability, so he falls into a space-class magic called Dimensional Enclosure, which emerged from the fusion of all the barriers created. Pazuzu tries to free himself from the spell like a fly in a jar, but Lloyd isn't happy with the demon's hybridization experiments on those wolf bears, so he implements his high-speed conjuration that manifests into a sinister magical sphere. Faced with this power, Pazuzu realizes that it might be the end of the line for him despite being theoretically invincible, so he tries to convince the boy to spare him in exchange for titles, money, and women, but all Lloyd wants is to test his toys on the insect before him. Next, Lloyd combines the blazing inferno with the raging tempest, a seismic ground, and the raging storm, multiplying by 100 the union between the four elements, then unleashes against the enemy all this unprecedented magical fury, accumulating about 240 spells per minute. Watching the spectacle, Lloyd is so enchanted by those colors that he decides to keep the show going for half an hour. However, the little guy gets tired along the way and unplugs the spell after 5 minutes, then quickly asks if there's still anyone inside, but Pazuzu looks like a charred eggplant and unfortunately can't respond. As for that talk of being immortal, Grim explains that the spells affect demons just as light and sound affect humans, but given the intensity of stress applied to the poor guy inside, it seems that's what happens. With difficulty, Pazuzu mumbles that he spent a century in anguish, creating those monsters to dominate the world, only for everything to collapse like a house of cards before his charred eggplant eyes. Right at that moment, the rest of the people start waking up, so Lloyd remembers that he needs to come up with a story to explain what happened. As Pazuzu slowly disintegrates, Grim explains that there's an advantage in relinquishing one's own ego to follow such a self-assured leader who enjoys doing the things he loves, and that's why Lloyd attracts so many people around him. However, realizing that this shouldn't be a demon's speech, Grim asserts that this isn't his case because all he desires is vengeance against his enslaver, so Pazuzu laughs and understands that he lost because he didn't have enough fun, then hands over his ambition to the grimoire, granting him extra mana to achieve his diabolical revenge. Downstairs, Lloyd explains that a wizard named Robert showed up and saved everyone, and Toe goes crazy wanting to know where her beloved little Robert is. Next, we have the extra animation of this chapter, where a crowd of enamored women welcomes the return of the second prince Albert to the domains of the kingdom of Salem, after defeating the powerful demon Pazuzu. Right behind him, the seventh prince Lloyd finally appears to the population's eyes and also provokes the enchantment of the damsels around, causing Silpha to cast a threatening look that puts the girls back in their place. Back to the Anime, the return was a little less cinematic than that, with the two sons of the king kneeling before him, and despite the sovereign recognizing Albert's talent in defeating a demon, he questions why he left with only his personal guard. Soon, asking where these Robert and Tao who helped in the mission are, the second prince says that Robert disappeared before everyone regained consciousness, while Tao went after the man after the incident. In fact, the girl was in love with the wizard who saved everyone, but upon realizing that the poncho covering her belonged to Lloyd, the boy himself points out that Robert is in the middle of the forest, causing the girl to dash off into the woods. Upon this, the king shows interest in this sorcerer named Robert, but Albert asserts that Lloyd was the main responsible for the expedition's success, and therefore should be considered part of the royal succession. After all, victory was only possible with the enchantments the boy cast on the soldiers' weapons. The king recalls that this means more competition for the second prince, but the young man doesn't mind if he's not the best choice to rule the kingdom because this decision should be made based on the ruler's aptitude, not their age, which is why Lloyd is out of the running for the throne. Thus, the king stands up enthusiastically and questions whether the seventh prince wishes to excel alongside his brothers in the quest for the throne, but without ceremony, Lloyd declines. Later, playing alone in the palace courtyard, a little boy is knocked down by one of the wolf bears he saved because he decided to follow the humans to the kingdom, unlike the rest who stayed in the forest. Watching the boy petting the beast, Grim becomes furious for never being treated this way by the boy, so he puffs up his skin to look like the wolf bear and attract the master's attention. Sure enough, Lloyd melts at the cuteness of Grim and squeezes him as if he were a plush demon. Then Silpha appears, commenting that the wolf bear liked Lloyd, so the child hides Grim as best he can in the fur of the giant beast, saying he named the animal Shiro because of its fur color. Hearing Lloyd say that he wants to teach tricks to Shiro through mana, Grimm notices that the brat only cares about magic, so much so that he refused the succession as if it were nothing. Speaking of which, the king highlights the humility of the seventh prince in rejecting the invitation, but Albert believes that the boy simply has other priorities at the moment. Hey folks, if you're digging this anime and want to see more, drop a like down below and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We need your support to hit 90,000 subscribers. Every subscription counts and helps us grow our community. Catch you in the next one.